Yes, people, yes, people, yes, people. It's the We Talk Football podcast. Welcome back to episode 11 and the fourth in our mini Movember series. Today, we bring you a very, very special episode. We're joined by a man that's been mentioned in this podcast countless times and a guy that would arguably be the third host on this podcast if he wasn't too busy living his best life in New York. It's Charlie Waters. How you doing, man?
How you doing, Jay? Thank you very much for your kind words of introduction. I couldn't help but look over at Quaku, shaking his head along to me potentially being the third host. But thank you very much. Thank you. Flattered to be here. Very excited.
No, Charlie, honestly, mate, I pine for the day that you return and that I can replace Quaku with you, my friend. Don't worry. I've got a microphone waiting for you, mate. Don't worry. But anyway, Quakes, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, all good. Obviously, having to deal with two West Ham fans isn't the most ideal situation. It's not how you want to spend your evening. But obviously, glad to have Charlie on the podcast. And like you say, potentially would be the third member of the We Talk Football family if he was in England. But alas, he's enjoying life in New York. So I look forward to chatting to Charlie.
So yeah, this really is similar to the podcast that we did the other week with Kojo and Julian in the fact that park football for all of us was such a huge thing. You know, me and you, Charlie, we lived on the same street. And I know that we were always down the park. If we weren't playing Pro Evo in your living room, we were down the park. Do you know what I mean? We were down the park playing football. How important was the park for you and, you know, your transition into football academies?
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. I think that park down the end of our road. I think as you guys alluded to when you spoke to Coach and to Julian, the standard that we actually had down there was pretty impressive. Given that there was only probably 15, 20 of us that went there. You know, the level of the players. You know, Coach was at West Ham. I was obviously at Orient. Julian at Southend. You two are all right.
Well, I was bang average. Like, I've got no problem in holding my hands up and saying that I was bang average. But I think for me, you know, that helped me improve. You know, when I was young, I was a really, really, really shy kid. But then when I got to like 11, 12, that age, and I started transitioning into 11 aside, and I was playing with you guys, like, honestly, that made me improve as a player, like heaps and bounds. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was below. Oh, well, I was certainly below you, but Quaku was too busy getting injured all the time to really be above me. But you know what I'm saying?
I think for me as well, I was scouted at quite a young age. I was probably 7 or 8 at the time when I started going to the Centre of Excellence at Leyton Orient. And what the park gave me was the freedom to go and express myself, play with my mates in just a purely fun and enjoyable setting, rather than maybe having the pressure on of being in a centre of excellence all the time, because I never had that Sunday league exposure of playing with your mates. And some of the best days of my life were down that park when we were kids. I mean, it was, you guys, you know, you were there as well. It was so much fun.
So you said that you got scouted from a young age. How old were you when you started at Orient?
Well, I actually signed before I could start playing for them. I remember doing a season, I don't even know if it was a whole season, with Ashenden Youth, a team you guys will obviously know very well. You probably would have been in the year above me. But it was before you could even like have a league. So it was just purely friendlies that you were playing. I think that must have been like under 7s, maybe under 8s. Yeah. And I just remember getting into the car after a game with my mum and my dad. And my dad sort of said to me, you know, some people were watching you play and they think you're quite good. What would you think of sort of playing in a different team? You know, a team that you might have heard of. He didn't say any names at the time, but he said that they were professional teams. I remember looking at him and being like, well, no, I don't really want to do that. Like, I'm pretty happy playing with my mates here, obviously not realising the opportunity that would present itself. He was like, well, you're not gonna be forced to do anything you don't want to do. But have a think about it. And I remember thinking about it, and later that day I sort of said, yeah, let's give it a go, see who we're talking about. So I actually went to train with Southend, and it was Steve Tilson at the time, who went on to become the actual manager, and Leyton Orient as well. And between the two, probably quite annoyingly for my dad, I chose Leyton Orient over Southend, which I'm sure he hated, given that I lived 5 minutes away from Southend. training ground and an hour and a half away from Leyton Orient. But they at the time they treated me really well. Like they were like, you can sign on the pitch on a match day and you can come and meet the players beforehand and they'll introduce themselves to you. So because they looked after me, I was just a bit swayed by that. But yeah, that must have been, I was 8 at the time, I think. And then my first season for Orient was under 9s.
Nice. In terms of, like, you said your dad gave you the choice to pick between Orient and Southend. Obviously, credit to your old man for that, because a lot of parents would take the onus on themselves and kind of pick it depending on how far the training ground's going to be. But touch on how important your dad was in terms of guiding you in football. Because I remember back in the days of, like, your dad would pick us up from one of our houses, we'd jump in the back of his van and we'd go over to Rochester Rec or whatever just to kick ball about. So how important was your dad in terms of you guiding your early stages in football?
Massive. So when I was really young, probably even before that age, he managed the under 18s at Great Wakering, which is where my brother played. He was also at Southend as a young kid, but then got released himself and went to Wakering. My dad took over the coaching and the manager's role there. I remember just, all my whole weekends would have been, watching them train, watching them play. And then with me, we'd always be out in the back in the garden or down Rochester Rec, like you said, Quakes, just kicking a ball about with him. And he was really good. Like you said, he gave me the choice between Orient and Southend. I'm not sure I'd have been so generous at the time. And, 2-3 times a week, plus a game on a Sunday, travelling up there. He was self-employed, so he was able to do it. But, it must have taken a strain on him. It just must have done. Yeah. So got massive admiration for the man in that respect.
And for anyone that doesn't realise or isn't local to Essex, Great Wakering are a very decent non-league side. Probably in I think they're step 7 is who Kojo plays for at the moment, isn't it, Quakes?
Yeah. Good team. Very, very good team. Obviously with kind of your early stages at Leyton Orient, you kind of had a feeling for the club, hence why you chose it over Southend. But when you got into there, what was the main difference between the football that you were playing, Sunday League, and the football and coaching at Leyton Orient? Was there a stark difference that you noticed as a child?
There was. I think for me personally, it wasn't really in the level of coaching, interestingly. And the reason for that is actually my coach at Ashington was a man who you guys will know well, Kevin Bedell.
Legend in the game.
Geezer.
Legend in the game, has scouted for... he was scouting for Man United, I think, at the time, and later on Arsenal. So he's a man who knows, football inside out, especially in our area. So actually, even when I was at Ashington, he was a big influence on my development as a really young player, even before I was at Leyton Orient. And that was quite a high standard itself. I think the main difference that I found, and I would always say moving forward, is that the players that you're playing with are all of a similar standard. And I think that makes such a difference. And you said it yourself, Jamie, when we were talking about park football a couple of minutes back, that you found, because you were playing alongside, academy players effectively, when you then translated that onto a pitch against, Sunday League, you found that you had that extra level. And I think just from training and playing with players who were of similar level just made me better over time.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's a really good segue into us for, so you said that when you're playing with players on a similar level to you, you must have played with some top players in your time at Leyton Orient. Who were the best players that you played with at Orient and played against while in the academy?
Played with and played against. We were all... there's probably none that you would know of in terms of the professional game. We had some good players, Billy Lobjoy, Tim Pittman. They're both playing decent non-league standard now. But some of the players I've played against are top draw. Benik Afobe at Arsenal was one really powerful player, hard to play against. Billy Knott was a name that was always mentioned in and around our area. I'm sure you've heard of him. Yeah. But there is one standout for me who I came up against when he was at QPR. A young Raheem Sterling, who, quite frankly, the term "tore me a new one" was probably created for this game of football that I played against this man. He was unbelievable. And it's funny because I actually remember watching him probably a year, maybe 6 months before I actually played against him. He's a year, maybe 2 years below me. So he's in a different age group. But when we played QPR, all the age groups would play QPR. I remember warming up for one of our games once and just looking across at one of the games that was going on. And this little kid was running rings around everyone. And I was thinking, who is this? Like, this is outrageous. And anyway, 6 months pass, and I see him line up against me. They've obviously put him in the older age group because he's excelling at his own age group. And the centre-half, our captain, Greg, before the game, he sort of looked at me and he went, that kid is good, like, shit hot. And I was like, well, there's not much I can do now. I'm lining up against him. He's left wing, I'm right back. Here we go. Within 5 minutes, I've given a penalty away. He's just come out of nowhere from the side of me, and I've just gone to ground and got nowhere near the ball. And he puts the penalty in. And then, when I say like, every time he got the ball, he was just a different level. Like, he'd drop his shoulder one way, go the other, ping it 30 yards to someone, and they're clean through. And he had me on toast, to be honest with you. And at half time, I got an absolute bollocking from the managers. It was horrible. Go back out there for the second half. Continues in the same vein. They try and move me to left back to avoid him, and they just move Raheem Sterling to the other side of the pitch.
Oh my god, that is a fucking.
It was honestly, I got subbed off after an hour. It is my least favourite game of football I've ever played in my life.
Oh wow!
Hands down, different level. Couldn't get near him,
bro.
And, the thing is that at the time, you don't appreciate that he's Raheem Sterling, who is an England international, Premier League winner, Champions League player. You just think this kid from the year below has just taught me a lesson that I will never forget.
Violation.
He was following you round the pitch. That is a violation.
My managers moved me to left back to avoid him. I saw him just trot over there. I was like, oh no.
Oh my. It's so interesting that you delve into actually what he's good at, because we've had 4 people on during our mini Movember series, and 3 of the 4 people have mentioned playing against Raheem Sterling. One of them was Julian, who got 9 goals scored against him, 5 of them by Raheem Sterling.
Yeah.
Kieran also mentioned how good he was, and here you are explaining how he followed you around the football pitch for 90 minutes or however long it was.
We lost 6-1. I think he scored 4 and assisted 1.
Madness.
It was different level, really was.
What was the standout attribute that he had? Like, what was the thing that separated him? Obviously, he was quick and obviously had a decent shot, but what was it that really made him different?
It was 2 things. 1 is pace, and 2, how the ball just stuck to his foot. It was like when you control a player on FIFA, and they're not really having bad touches. It's going exactly where they want it to go. He was doing that in real life, and I mean, yeah, for the penalty, for example, I am favourite. The ball just broke loose in the box. I'm favourite to get it. Anyone else is there, I'm getting there first. But he's just come out of nowhere. He's a step ahead of the game. He saw it coming before it broke loose. Whereas I'm flat-footed and not ready for it. It's just that different level. And that's why he's gone on to do amazing things so far, and I'm sure there's still more to come from him.
Definitely.
I mean that's scary. That's scary. And yeah, like, it's interesting you say that, because when you are a kid and you are getting shown up by these players, you're not thinking, oh, in 10 years' time you're going to be an England international. You're just getting
not at all. You don't know.
Messed up.
You can can tell he was a different level. As I said, he's already playing up a year. I'm at Leyton Orient. I'm not at. If he's at Liverpool doing that, and you are thinking, Jesus, he's the best player in the best team in the best academy, so you kind of expect it. We're at QPR, Leyton Orient. They're 2, lower tier teams. QPR aren't. They're better off than Leyton Orient, but yeah, you don't ever think he's going to go on to be an England international and win Premier Leagues.
That's crazy.
That is absolutely bad. I just think the fact that, like, your teammate came up to you literally, a minute or 2 before the game, is like, he's good. What did you think that was going to do for your confidence? You're like, all right, cheers, mate. I
think he sort of said it as a warning, because as I said, I remember watching him 6 months before, and you see him running around players for fun. But you think, if that was me out there, I wouldn't be making these mistakes. But what he did so well is he found what worked, and he would do it 10, 20 times in a game.
Yeah.
But it worked every time. And, it gets to that point where you genuinely don't know what to do to stop him. I couldn't drop off him because he'd just knock it past me and run. I couldn't go tight because he'd just spin off me and beat me on the turn. So it was like I'm genuinely out of ideas for how to stop this man as soon as he's got the ball. Just imagine the kid version of Gareth Bale against Maicon, Tottenham against Inter. Where you go, Maicon's career is over, and that's exactly what happened to me at the age of 14 or whatever I was.
Mate, at least you made it that far. Like you say, me and Jamie didn't even get to make it that far to be followed around by Raheem Sterling. So all due to you for doing that.
Yeah, you can tell that one to the grandkids. One thing that.
A proud moment in my life.
Violation. That is a violation. How can you pause and be like, yeah, you can tell that onto the grandkids.
But again, I know you've been listening to the podcast over the last few weeks, Charlie, and we have had the opportunity to talk to plenty of academy players. And one thing that's become apparent to me in Kwaku is that although, like, you know, sometimes, especially with Kojo and Julian and Kieran, and that your talent hasn't always been enough when you're in these academies. A lot of the time there's been politics that are involved in these academies, and that can sometimes hinder a player's, you know, progression. For example, you know, when Julian said, you know, he was getting benched for players that could play more so they could get a move and earn more money for the club and things like that. And some other players were there was like favoritism in certain squads. At Leyton Orient, how long were you there, and did you ever experience any sort of politics while you were in the academy?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to say because you never really know what's going on inside coaches and what's going on, you know, behind the scenes, things that you don't see. I definitely do agree that there is favoritism. I think part of me thinks that you would get that in any industry, anywhere. People like who they like. You know, you go through the age groups. I was at Orient for 8-9 years, from 8 till 16, 17. And, you know, you'll have coaches that favour the way you play. And when you're in the good books, you know, you are playing, you know, week in, week out, and it's all fun and games. I think for me, there was a period, I'm going to say probably when I was 14, 15, so getting towards the end, where I was probably struggling a little bit more, and I found myself getting left out of squads to go and play games, and it's a frustrating time, and especially because at a side like Leyton Orient, you know, you need to be, especially as you get to the age of 14, 15, you need to be quite physical, and as you guys know, I was always, you know, the scrawny little slow kid. So as we were getting to those age groups, I did certainly find it tough, and it was a difficult thing to deal with at the time. You know, when your size is really what's letting you down. There's not a lot you can do about it. But all I could really do was just try and get my head down and work hard on the things that I was good at. But yeah, you definitely see favoritism throughout.
And for reference, you're one of the most techie players I've ever seen in my life. Like, when the ball's at your feet, it's stuck to your feet.
He's all right. He's all right.
No, honestly, Kwaku's a hater. You know, like, do you remember, like, I was talking to Kwaku about this off camera a little while earlier, and this is a little bit off topic, but remember we had that six-a-side team?
Oh, yeah.
Charlie's unplayable. Charlie's unplayable at six-a-side. Yeah, Warner's Bridge, exactly. If you know, right? Charlie is unplayable at six-a-side because when the ball's at his feet, you just can't get near him. It's a little quick shuffle of the feet, boom, he's gone. Yeah. That team was techie. That team was
very, very techie. Like, there was so much ability in that team. And obviously, like, Charlie was head and shoulders the best player there, obviously coming from academy football. But I suppose, like, from mine and Jamie's point of view, we've always held you and Kojo and Julian and the players that we played with in such high esteem because we don't really know any different from Sunday League football. And you are obviously part of ACL gang, so I think playing on those hard concrete pitches did something to all of our knees when we torn our ACLs.
What have we got? 2 working knees between the 3 of us here?
It's not looking good for us.
That's not even an exaggeration. That's not an exaggeration, by the way.
But how much did, like, injury affect your your growth at Leyton Orient, and how much did that kind of hinder your progress?
I mean, massively. It's funny, I was never injury prone at all until the age of about 15. I remember I broke my arm. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't say a lot, does it?
Injury prone at 15.
But since then, I don't think I've been fully fit again. Genuinely, I remember I broke my arm sort of in the January of one season. Ended the season, and actually that was the year where I really started my physicality really became an issue. And basically at the end of every season, I know Kojo touched on this when he was on the pod. You would sit down with your coach or your manager at the time, and they would tell you whether you were going to be kept for the next year or not.
Yeah.
And I remember all the way through my time at Leyton Orient, sort of be going to these meetings at the end of the year, and my dad would sort of be driving me up there, and he'd say, you've got nothing to worry about, like you'll be fine. But I remember this year in particular, I was like, and he himself was like, look, I don't know, this time around, it's gonna be tight, it's touch and go. And I remember driving up there, and I was just so nervous the whole time. By that point, there's nothing you can do. You've been there all year. Yeah. That was the first year where I started getting injuries, and as I said, my physicality became an issue. And then but I was fortunate enough to be kept on that year. And then in the pre-season of the next season, we were playing in a tournament, and I tore my ACL. And after that point, it was a very difficult climb to come back. And I'm still a growing lad, trying to recover from an ACL injury and surgery. Managed to get back, started playing, and literally did the same thing again. Probably the second time I stepped onto a football pitch, and by the time the second ACL injury, I packed it in myself. I was devastated at the time, but yeah, it just wasn't to be, unfortunately.
That sucks. I mean, I've done my ACL once, and I'm waiting for surgery now. I know you've torn it like twice, right, Quakes, but it's the worst pain I've ever been through in my life. So the fact that you went through that at like 15 years old, my heart goes out to you.
Oh,
I remember you did your knee around the same time. This is going back down memory lane, but I remember you did your knee around the same time as Luis Boamorte. Because at 15, I had no idea what an ACL was.
That is a random thing to remember.
I remember we were down the park, and you said, "Oh, I've done my knee," and I said, "Oh, what have you done?" He went, "Oh, Boamorte got injured at the weekend. I've just done that."
Did I say that? Did I?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you telling me. So I guess that's probably quite a natural place to move on. So we know that injuries spelled the end of your time at Leyton Orient, because it came at such a pivotal time in your adolescence. What was your next step then? Because what did you do after football when you realised that football was no longer the primary motive?
Yeah, I guess at that moment it's kind of a tough one to take, because up until that point, all I really had done was play football my entire life. As I said, from the age of 7 or 8, whenever I started playing with Ashington, it was play football 2-3 times a week at training, play a game at the weekend. If I'm at school, I'm playing football at lunch, and then we come home and we go to the park and play football with you guys. Like, it was all I really done, and all the conversations that you have in and around with people. Like, I remember people just constantly sort of saying, what do you think you'll be able to make it as a footballer, and things like that. And when you're constantly getting those questions, and then suddenly you realise that actually this is a no-go, it was a devastating moment at that time. Fortunately for me, my parents had always placed a very big emphasis on making sure that I got a good education and make sure my grades were good. Yeah. So from that side of things, the timing of the injury, although awful for the prospects of becoming a footballer at the age of 16, what it did mean was that I could still go to college, and then as a result of that, go to university. If it happened a year later, if I'd been, because it was scholarship year, effectively, was the year where I tore my ACL. If I hadn't torn my ACL, and best case scenario, I then go and get a scholarship, there are lots of things that I wouldn't have been able to do. I wouldn't have been able to do A levels, just because of the time that's taken up by playing football. I just don't think you'd feasibly be able to have the time to do it. There's probably people out there that have managed it, but
Kojo.
Did he actually? Good effort on the man. He's a smarter boy than I am. So because of the timing of it, it sort of made my mind up for me. It was, football's a no-go. We've got to go down another route. So it was straight to college for me from there, and then after that, university.
Nice. In terms of like dedicating your time to it, you seem like you were pretty cold-blooded with it. It seems you kind of knew in your head you weren't going to be a footballer, then you dedicate your time to your A-levels to go and get your education. A lot of times you find people chasing the dream a little bit, so they might go and trial at a club. They might go and see what non-league's like. Was that never a thought, a thought that come to your mind?
To be honest, no. It wasn't, which might be a bit of a surprise. You would expect that somebody who had been okay at football might try and go down that road. I think for me there are a few things. It's almost a difficult one to say, but I'd almost fallen out of love with playing football in my last year. I said I was struggling at Orient itself. And it sort of did make me look at it and go, I'm not having fun. I'm not necessarily enjoying this anymore. I'm doing it because I probably am good enough to be here on my day. Like I can play football fine, and that's great. But so all the pressure that's associated with being in a centre of excellence and constantly maintaining those standards, it sort of wore me down and rode me down. And then the injuries alongside it. When it did come to it, I was a bit like, you know what, I just don't think this is for me anymore. It's I never really thought about it until you just asked that question, but I think that is why I was so cutthroat at that time.
Well, at that age, you've just got to focus on things that you enjoy, and if your love had fallen out of the game, I think it was around that time that I've already spoken about it, but it was around the time when we started playing six-a-side and we all started playing things for the enjoyment of it. So
exactly.
And then we all managed to get injured there as well.
That side of it, like as I said, I never got to do that as a kid. I never really played Sunday league. It was straight away centre of excellence for that whole time until I was injured. So then to be able to just go and enjoy the game again was great for me.
So can you briefly just compare what that was like? Because you say the enjoyment wasn't really there when you come through centre of excellence, but when we were at the park, we always saw you with a smile on your face when you're doing tag team championships and it's you and Kojo versus me and Jamie or whatnot. You always seem to enjoy the game down there. So did you kind of get more enjoyment when you're playing with your mates every day after
100%.
school, with us, or was it yeah, you did?
100%. I've always felt that for me, I always played best when I was free to do what I wanted to do with a football and not be constrained by being told by coaches and managers that, we need you to do this. We need you to do this. So when I was able to just go down the park with you guys and play, almost the quality of my football was probably better, to be honest, than it would have been when I was then going training the next day. And yeah, I do think that it does depend what coaches you have. When I was really young at Leyton Orient, some of my coaches were excellent, and I remember loving those years and those seasons. And then as you get a bit older, it then starts to become not necessarily who's a great footballer, but who can we see being as part of our reserve team one day or our first team one day, especially 15, 16. Some of my some of the people in my age group were then starting to play in the reserves and things like that. And as I said, when it got to those age groups, I was probably a little bit behind where I needed to be physically to be in those in selected for those games. And fair play to Leyton Orient, they still saw enough in me to keep me on at those times, which is great. But I probably was starting to fall out of that favourites list and start to become one where it was like, well, he needs to start doing something else now if he wants to kick on. And I do think that sort of pressure is what made me start to think that maybe this isn't for me. And then the injuries just compounded it.
Yeah. So going back to, obviously you fell out of love with football and then you started playing football with us down the park and, playing six-a-side and you enjoyed it. Now you're living in New York. Let's just address that first and foremost. You're living in New York now. Do you ever get any chance to play football when you're out there?
Not now because of COVID, purely.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
There's no opportunity to play out here. We nearly did set up we tried to set up a work five-a-side team, but COVID swiftly put that one on hold.
Watch your knees, man. Watch your knees. You've had 2 ACL surgeries. Like, you are risking it. Healthcare out in America is different to out here, man. You need to be careful.
Well, if it does go again, I'll be on the next plane home. So don't worry.
For sure, I'm bankrupt, surely.
Be coming back for the NHS.
Yeah.
What's the standard like out there? Do you ever get much chance to watch like the MLS or anything like that while you're out there?
The MLS is not something I really keep tabs on, to be perfectly honest with you. The thing is that they have really good coverage of the Premier League out here. Every game is on ATV out here, even more so than in the UK. Because in the UK you've got your TV rights laws where your 3:00 games on Saturdays can't be shown. They don't have that out here. So it's still strictly Premier League for me. Don't start talking about the MLS.
Charles, to be fair, you sound a little bit American, to be fair. I swear I heard you before we jumped on the Zoom call. You said soccer. I swear to God you said soccer.
Don't be doing
Jamie, did you hear it? Jamie, you heard
it? I'm not jumping on this, Kwaku. You're lying, bruv. You're lying. This is an insight into our friendship, guys. This is an insight. Anyone that's listening to the podcast, me and Charlie have just got this synergy, for years and years and years. Me and Charlie can have this conversation. It's all friendly banter. But there's this rivalry between these two. The amount of times they just butt heads. They butt heads. It's about who's got the biggest cojones.
Not even because
correct.
We can all admit that I have this rivalry with you, Jamie. I have this rivalry with you, Charlie. I have this rivalry with Kojo. You man hate on the kids. You know what I mean? You man hate on the kids. And that's what it is. And I think that's because you're both West Ham fans. So that's probably the best kind of transition into football, current football right now, bro. I want to hear your thoughts on your boys this season.
On West Ham?
We're doing it. Yeah. I'll let you go, Charlie. Yeah.
I'm pleasantly surprised with what I've seen so far from West Ham. We I think at the start of the season, I was sceptical, to be honest with you. I don't think we'd done enough in the transfer market. I had my doubts about Moyes. But, he's been given the chance. And I don't think we can argue with what we've seen so far. We were terrible against Newcastle on the opening day. And then actually, our run of fixtures, I think, has favoured us because we are a side where, and with Moyes as manager, where if we shut up shop, we can be difficult to beat if people are concentrating and we've got our best team out there. And, I think we had Arsenal after the Newcastle game where we got beat with a late goal. We then had a run of about 4 or 5 more difficult games and we managed to pick up some good points. And then we've seen Fulham and Sheffield United in the last 2 where we won both 1-0, thanks to a quite terrible Lookman penalty and then a great Haller goal against Sheffield United. But the signs are there that Moyes is getting the best out of the players that we've got. Hopefully we can get Antonio back fit and scoring again. And, there's no reason why we can't kick on from here.
I mean, we haven't actually spoken about current football all month, really, have we, Quakes? But I think, from my perspective of West Ham, what I'm really impressed with over the last few weeks is that I think a lot of people would have expected West Ham to falter going into that Fulham game.
100%.
I think me and you did an IGTV, actually, Quakey, didn't we? Where both of us were saying, I feel like West Ham's season starts today, and that's when we were like playing Fulham, because I felt like it could have gone either way. Up until that game, we've gone into every game where we're not favourites, but we're going to the Fulham game, under fortunate circumstances, we've snuck a win, but to then go to Sheffield United away, swallow up a lot of pressure all game, really. Sheffield could have scored a bucket full of goals, but we've snuck a win away there. Heller's gone away with Ivory Coast, scored for them, come back, started for us at striker, scored a goal. It's looking rosy at West Ham, but again, I reiterate everything you said there, Charlie. At the start of the season, I was very, very, very critical of West Ham. I tip them to go down, I'll hold my hands up.
Please, that's where I'm going to interject. I ain't hearing, Jamie, I ain't hearing a word from you about West Ham. No gas, no nothing. At the beginning of the season, it's documented. We started the podcast in 2020. Everything that we say is documented.
And I stand by those comments. Everything
Jamie
I said, I do stand by it. The border a joke. The border a joke.
Going to get relegated. And every week that we picked fixtures, he picked them to win, barring the Liverpool one. So how does that correlate? You're not allowed to gas about West Ham this season. When you pick your team to go down at the beginning of the season, no gas allowed. No gas allowed, unfortunately. And them's are the rules.
What about your shout, Quakes? Sorry, I shouldn't really be being the one asking the questions, but
go, Charlie, go on, my friend. Go.
I'm going to. I mean, you had Chelsea to win the league at the start of the year, and I was doubtful, but actually the way things are unfolding, if you were to go about your business quietly like you have been under Frank Lampard, maybe there's a chance.
maybe there's a chance.
Maybe there's a chance they can finish top 4, Charlie. All right, they're not winning the league. Look at Liverpool. Liverpool, they beat Leicester 3-0 yesterday. Look at the injuries they've got. It's a joke. Yeah. Liverpool, the league is Liverpool's to lose. Like, who's to say how long they can do this for? But yeah. Tottenham, like, let's address the elephant in the room. Like, Tottenham look top level, and I hate saying that as a West Ham fan.
Yeah. As a West Ham fan, and as someone who has consistently hated on Jose Mourinho, it's a really tough one to take.
Yeah, for sure. Tottenham do look dangerous. Liverpool look good. City look blunt. Chelsea look like the best team in the world. And my pre-season prediction, I'm still sticking by it. I'm still confident that we're going to win the league.
How about the top scorer for Aubameyang? Are you sticking by that, Craigs?
Well, I don't remember that prediction, to be fair. What was that one? Aubameyang, top scorer? I don't remember saying that.
Oh, okay. I don't want to hear no gas, all right? I don't want to hear no gas, Kwaku. You tipped Aubameyang. Yeah, I tipped Werner to be top scorer. To be fair, as long as Frank Lampard plays Tammy in the middle, I don't think Werner's going to get as many goals as he should. So,
yeah.
Did you see that run the other day where he set up Tammy? That was unbelievable, by the way. You see that burst of pace went through the hole that wasn't really there, and then set Tammy up, and then
It's mad. In terms of West Ham and like following in New York, Charlie, is there like a contingent of West Ham fans over there in the city? Is there like people who congregate and go to bars to watch the game? Like, what's it like out there?
Yeah, so most teams will have their team pub, so to speak. So West Ham's is Smithfield Hall over on 23rd Street on the west side. So I find myself there most weekends, soaking up the atmosphere. Obviously, COVID's meant that there's not quite so much atmosphere, but it is back open again, and I've been there once since it reopened, and it's a nice little pub.
Nice. We definitely need to come out there at some point if the borders open up, just to see what it's like to watch some soccer.
Well, there was we had the rumblings of New Year's Eve. Like, do you remember, like during the first lockdown, we were doing weekly when we were all in the first lockdown. Obviously, you were in New York, and we were accounting for the time zone, and we're doing our lockdown monopoly, over Zoom calls, and we were talking about New Year's Eve. We were talking about New Year's Eve this year. Who would have imagined the year that's followed, or like the 6 months that's followed since then? But yeah, definitely next year we need to come out at some point and just soak up the culture. Go to that West Ham pub, Charlie? You know what I mean? That sounds great.
Maybe.
I look forward to it. I really do.
Charlie, obviously it's been amazing having you on this week. We talked about it for ages and ages and ages. Like Jamie touched on before, if you were living in the UK, you would be the third member of the We Talk Football podcast. But it's been something that we've not like a dream fulfilled, but obviously we've talked about doing this kind of stuff forever, and like how us three just talking about football and putting it out in the ether for people to listen to. It's been sick, man.
No, thank you very much for having me. And I just wanted to say that I think what you guys are doing with your November mini-series, with your mental health aspect, given the time and pandemics and lockdowns, I think it's a really nice touch. So good job, guys. Keep it going.
Sick, mate. We appreciate that, bro. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Much love.
Thank you for having me.
So there it was, guys. The big man himself, Charlie Waters. There's another podcast in the books, and that might be my favourite one yet. Yeah, how'd you feel about that one, Cakes?
Yeah, no, I really like that one. Obviously, we talked about Charlie numerous times on the podcast, and it was good to finally get him on. Obviously, the time difference made it difficult to kind of sync it up, but I'm glad that we did it, man. It was good. It was good. And hearing about like what he did late in Orient, things that we didn't even know. We've known this guy for the best part of 20 years, and some of these stories were new to us. So yeah, it's good to hear how Raheem Sterling violated him multiple times.
100%. That will be getting replayed in the group chat for years to come. I'll be letting him know about that on plenty of nights out once we're out of this lockdown period. And, you know, you guys are more likely going to see Charlie again. He'll come on he'll come on the podcast again, 100% Quakes.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that we really should say is this is probably going to be the last episode of November, and it really will, put a nice round off on our mini Movember series. And I think what I just wanted to say, and I know what Quaker wants to say it as well, is I want to say a massive thank you to anyone that's donated to our cause so far. I think we've raised just over £400, which is kind of crazy because I don't think either of us really anticipated raising much. So, you know, to really get some really insightful conversations out there and concentrate on some mental health and, you know, talk about some topics that, you know, you might not hear about and something we didn't really talk about. I've never really spoken about these kind of things with Charlie, and I think, you know, it's been important, and I think it's something that me and you will be pursuing again in the future. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for all the support that we've got over these podcasts. We're buzzing with it.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the fact that we've had to grow these dodgy looking moustaches as well. Like Jamie's killing it with the handlebars. Mine's kind of Zorro-esque. I'm struggling out here, but like Jamie said, we're forever grateful for the money you donated. And yeah, just keep on tuning in. This episode was, like we said, one of our favourites, and we're happy to bring you more episodes going forward.
So where can they find us, Quakes? Tell them the socials.
You can find us on Twitter, W2F Podcast 90. I say it every week, but we're going to become more active on Twitter, I promise. On Facebook, it's We Talk Football Podcast. On Instagram, it's at We Talk Football Podcast. You know where the things are. Follow, like, subscribe, and we'll see you later.
Yeah, and if you are watching on YouTube, share it, like and subscribe, guys. You know, we're up to 33 subscribers now. 33. That's huge for us. So keep liking, keep subscribing, share our content, and yeah, peace, guys. Thanks a lot.
Love.